Let us pray. Our Father, we thank you for your abundant blessings to our province and ourselves. We ask you to ensure to us your guidance and the will to follow it in this assembly. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, as most members of the Assembly would know, this year Mr. Ed Lukowich and his rink, comprised of Neil Houston, John Ferguson, and Brent Syme, represented Alberta and won the 1986 World Curling Championship after winning the Canadian Curling Championships. That was a significant achievement by a group of talented Albertans and one that deserves our recognition. I'd also like to point out an interesting fact, and that is that Ed is unique, and I understand he is the only person to have been a member of a rink to win the Canadian Junior Curling Championship, the Canadian Men's Curling Championship, and the World Men's Curling Championship. No one else has won all three. All members of that rink are unable to be here today, but Ed and his wife Judy, who is also a fine curler, are in your gallery, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask him and Judy to rise and be recognized by this Assembly.
Presenting petitions, reading and receiving petitions, presenting reports by standing and special committees, notices of motions, introduction of bills, tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to file a statement today to enable members to more clearly understand the manifest on Executive Council air travel that I filed in the legislature on Monday, July the 14th. Please allow me to make very clear that the manifest actually accounts for the movement of the aircraft from its place of origin to its ultimate destination. The primary passenger, or for that matter other passengers, may not have been on the aircraft for the entire flight. For example, Mr. Speaker, the trip which was made by the former Minister of Transportation, Mr. Moore, on April the 27th, 1985, which listed the plane as having traveled from Edmonton to Grand Prairie to Calgary, back to Grand Prairie and returned to Edmonton, reflects the air movement of the plane, not of the Minister. The Minister actually flew by the Time Air commercial flight from Edmonton to Grand Prairie on Friday, April the 26th, then flew by government aircraft from Grand Prairie to Calgary and returned on April the 27th, and finally returned to Edmonton from Grand Prairie on a Time Air commercial flight on Sunday, April the 28th. Further, Mr. Speaker, some unfortunate errors in the document file have been discovered. One I would like to correct today is a trip reported on June the 21st, 1985, which lists Mr. John Chomiak as the primary passenger on an Edmonton to Grand Cache flight. I have now confirmed that the Honourable Tom Chambers, then Minister of Public Works, Supply and Services, was the primary passenger on that flight. Mr. Chomiak accompanied the official group in his role as a consultant on the Grand Cache project. Mr. Speaker, I will file in the near future an addendum to the manifest correcting any errors. Thank you.
Introduction of special guests. Ministerial statement.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to you and through you to the House Mr. Dave Pym. Mr. Pym will be representing the let's come. Mr. Pym will be representing Red Deer North in Ottawa this fall at Carleton University, and I'd like him to rise and receive the warm welcome of this House.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, in absence, I believe, of the chair of the Alberta Research Council, I'll direct the questions to the Minister of Economic Development. And it falls on my questions of yesterday regarding local procurement. And it appears that the Alberta Research Council has entered into a $2.5 million U.S. partnership with Hydrocarbon Research Incorporated of New Jersey and the Electronic Power Research Institute of California to develop a co-processing system for heavy oil and coal. My question flowing from that is, can the Minister assure the Assembly that the ARC made every effort to involve Albertans or to see if we had this research capability before going to the United States?
Mr. Speaker, I can advise the Assembly that this research proposition is a part of a much larger research project. And while I cannot confirm all of the honourable member's questions today, if he has others, I'd be pleased to take them under advice and to check for him.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I just happen to have a couple other ones I'd like to ask about it. Apparently, Mr. Speaker, the University of Calgary Engineering Department is involved in development of two-phase pipelines. My question is, did the Research Council approach the University of Calgary to see if they might be interested in undertaking this research?
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to advise honourable members that there is an interdepartmental committee and an interagency committee which does overview research, and while I can't answer the specific question, I will certainly be able to check and to report back. But based upon the existence of such a committee, I would assume that, in fact, that had been done.
Mr. Speaker, if I might supplement the response of the Honourable Minister to the Honourable Leader, since the Honourable Leader made reference to his question of yesterday on local procurement, which I have now had the opportunity to investigate. First of all, let me say that the tender document in question was not a tender document of Public Works Supply and Services.
Sorry, Honourable Member, Honourable Minister, nice try. Leader of the Opposition.
You want to get a... We'll come back, Artie. Don't get Mr. Yeah, right, Mr. Speaker. Flowing from this, under the terms of this development agreement with these American firms, who will own the technology developed through this publicly funded deal, and who will earn the money from its commercial application?
Mr. Speaker, the Alberta Research Council is involved in many, many different research projects, and I would be happy to provide details on any one of what I am sure is several hundred different projects if honourable members would give me some notice to do so. Mr. Chairman, the kind of detail that is being requested today is not the kind of detail that I have at my fingertips, but I would certainly be pleased to oblige any honourable member.
I see, Mr. Speaker, I've raised my questions. The chairman of the council came in, but just to come back to general principles about this, perhaps to the Minister of Economic Development, would the minister now then issue a set of guidelines or principles dealing with government and crown corporations in Alberta procurement policy?
Mr. Speaker, earlier this week and I believe last week in question period, we discussed the policy of the government with respect to procurement policies. And with respect to the government, I had outlined that within Canada, we don't implement any provincial preference, but there are certain encouragements that are provided to Crown agencies in terms of the specifying of contracts, because there is always a range of suppliers that can meet certain requirements under contracts that are advertised. We do encourage and outline for Crown agencies and government with respect to the guidelines that we'd like them to follow. The question of whether or not we would implement a provincial preference or have preferences with our neighbors across the United States is one that is the subject of our bilateral trade discussions, and is one that is clearly important in terms of our trading relationships with the United States. It's important that we trade. All of us are aware that Alberta has a huge export surplus in terms of our trade with the United States. As a matter of fact, our trade with the United States in 1985 was in excess of $12 billion worth of exports. We would expect that there would be opportunities for Americans to trade as well with Canadians. But we do assure that all things being equal, that Albertans receive the first preference.
Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunications.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to supplement the answer that my colleague has given by pointing out that I believe it was in 1980 there was a special instruction provided from the Premier of the day encouraging every opportunity to sourcing locally. That was reiterated, I believe, in 1983, and I believe that the current Premier issued or reissued, re-emphasized such a policy again in December of 1985 or January of 1986. I'm not exactly sure of the date. I would go further, Mr. Speaker, and say that pursuant to a motion by the honourable member from for Calgary North Hill earlier in this assembly, that the Department of Technology, Research and Telecommunications is working on a policy which would remove some of the risk, provide some assistance to persons charged with the responsibility for purchasing in government and in agencies of government on a first purchase to try to source as much material as we can in Alberta. Finally, Mr. Speaker, reverting to the honourable member's second question, I would add that there is a great deal of proprietary information that can be gained at relatively little cost by joint venturing and sharing with research bodies elsewhere, and that is a practice of the Research Council.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Technology. Could he undertake to inform some of the Crown corporations that two-phase pipelines have been studied and worked on since the Mackenzie Valley early days for over 10 years ago, and there's a great deal of technology in Alberta. As a matter of fact, Alberta is a leader. There's no need to be going around and around the country looking for more advice on that particular topic.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to receive the representation, and I'm pleased that the honourable member of the Liberals has made the same information available to the honourable leader of the New Democrats, whose allegation it is we're discussing.
Second main question, Leader of the Official Opposition.
No, it was an allegation. I just thought it was a friendly question. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my second set of allegations to the Honourable Premier. And Mr. Speaker, it seems that the Premier's relationship with his good kissing cousins in Ottawa seem to be a bit on the rocks. And I want to ask him, what strong, firm protest has the Premier sent to the Prime Minister about the prospect of a $1 billion federal loan guarantee to Mobile for Hibernia, falling on the federal government backing away from their agreement to provide $780 million in loan guarantees for the Husky upgrader?
Mr. Speaker, I would have no objection at all to the federal government doing something to assist in the Newfoundland area at all. I think if they can, they should. I think the real meat to the question is whether or not if they do something there, they should also assist in our province to the greatest extent possible. And, Mr. Speaker, I would like to just make one other point about the question, and that is that it's highly speculative. It is true that there are discussions going on between the federal government and developers in the Hibernia field offshore. However, those discussions are just that, going on. I've asked our Minister of Energy to pursue the details of the matter to the fullest extent possible, and it may be possible that we can provide additional information to the House in the future. For our part, Mr. Speaker, we will work as hard as we possibly can through every avenue available to us to make sure that Albertans receive the assistance that they need when they are in trouble now in our energy industry.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister says there's only a limited amount of money, and they've backed off the one and they're prepared to look at the other. I would think that the Premier would be much more concerned about this, not quite as laid back. But is the Premier saying at this particular time that he's not concerned about this, and this is approximately, I might point out, the same amount of money as we're trying to get on the PGRT, that this is not a concern of this government at this time?
Well, Mr. Speaker, how in the world could he have got that out of my answer? I didn't say we weren't concerned about it. He should maybe read the answer tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, I said that the people of Newfoundland deserve certain assistance from the federal government, and I would not try and talk them out of helping the people of Newfoundland. Our responsibility is here with the people of Alberta, and we believe there should be federal assistance to what is a problem for a national industry, the energy industry. We are doing a great deal ourselves, and we are urging the federal government through every channel available to us to also participate in assistance to our energy industry when it needs that help. I think that we've made a great deal of progress. I believe we'll make a great deal more. As I said yesterday, we've been able to negotiate the total elimination of the, except for the remainder of the PGRT, a portion of the PGRT, the total elimination of the National Energy Program, which was foisted on this government through the support of both the Liberals and the NDP. And, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we are trying to remove the remainder of it, but that isn't enough. We will also continue to work for additional assistance, which I feel is necessary to our industry.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps the Premier could take some negotiation lessons from Brian Peckford. But he brought up the National Energy Program, and I'd like to ask the Premier this. Has the Premier communicated any concern about the similarity of this proposal to provisions of the National Energy Program which diverted investment and activity out of the western sedimentary basin to the frontiers and offshore?
As I said before, Mr. Speaker, our concern is that we receive, for our industry and for the people of Alberta, for economic activity and for jobs in this province, and for developing our resources, the assistance that is required, and that is what we will be working towards.
That's all very nice. We certainly seem to be working backwards at this point, but I understand that the Premier is getting together with his good friends from Alberta, with our Alberta MPs tomorrow. And my question is to the Premier, is he going to suggest in the strongest possible language to the Alberta MPs that they better start representing Alberta, or there'll be new MPs after the next election? Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, we are meeting with the members of Parliament from Alberta tomorrow, and the agenda will allow a full discussion of a wide variety of matters affecting Alberta. We both serve the same constituents. It's my judgment that those Alberta MPs have both, through many years in opposition and now in government, served this province very well. There are additional things that we feel should be done, and they are working along with us to have those things happen. I think, Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the support that those MPs have received from the people of Alberta indicates the work that they've been doing, and they are not electing any members as opposite.
Thank you, member for Little Bow.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Premier with regards to the position and what has happened with regards to the engineering on the Husky upgrader. Where are we at the present time? And secondly, are there any target dates established by which negotiations should be continued or firmed up with the federal government relative to the Husky upgrader?
Mr. Speaker, the Husky upgrader is proceeding through a phase that it was necessary to proceed through before there would be actual construction. That phase is being financed both by the Saskatchewan government, the Alberta government, and the federal government, plus the company involved, Husky. That work, which will lead to a decision point for construction, should be completed sometime early in 1987. Best estimates are it would be somewhere around March or April of 1987, assuming that all the work is able to be completed on time. At that time, we would join together in a final decision on construction, which I would, and most Albertans, would very much like to see happen.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, and back to the topic of the $1 billion guarantee to Hibernia. Would the Premier undertake to take to that love-in they're holding tomorrow with the federal counterparts the fact that $1 billion spent in Western Canada in the conventional oil industry will create 25,000 to 30,000 jobs, whereas $1 billion offshore is only to create 10,000 jobs?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the agenda will provide the ability to discuss a whole range of matters, but I've got to come back to the basis of the questions, and that is that they are merely dealing in a speculative matter. And while it's something that is speculated in the media, and I understand the desire to react to that, the total dollars and the manner in which it might be provided is completely up for discussion, and therefore is not in any way something that is agreed on. However, I come back to what I said earlier. We will insist that the people of Alberta receive the assistance that they require in this time when assistance is needed due to the instability of the international oil prices.
Main question, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, and this is also the Premier, it concerns the last election, when amongst the many goodies promised by the Premier was private telephone lines to rural Albertans. Is the government intending to use old electromagnetic or obsolete electromagnetic equipment to set up the rural private lines rather than the versatile fiber optic that is now or intention to use the excess supply of the old electromagnetic equipment you have in your warehouses?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the honourable member would want us to, and we will, use the best technology available for the task. My colleague, the Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunications, may well want to provide additional detail to the member for Westlock Sturgeon.
I don't want to use up my supplemental to get a supplemental. I didn't want to use up my supplemental to get a supplemental. He's usually so quick on his feet, Mr. Speaker. Okay, to the Minister, Is it the intention to use electromagnetic or fiber optic equipment to provide private telephone lines to for rural subscribers?
Mr. Speaker, the upgrading of the individual line service has to be viewed in several different components. And one element of it is the modernization of switching equipment in the different localities and the connections between that switching equipment. It is the intention of Alberta government telephones to use fiber optics to the where it is cost efficient and quality effective in that process. I do not believe that the nature of the economies in fiber optics today would lend itself to the subscriber loop portion of the individual line service connection. Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member of the Liberals has more detailed questions, I'd be pleased to try to answer them this afternoon for him.
Mr. Speaker, this time I'll go directly to the fountain and the danger of losing my supplementary. I'm sure the minister is quite aware that fiber optic can do much more than electromagnetic, and that he has a surplus of old-fashioned electromagnetic on hand that he's now foisting over onto the farmers. But I'd like to ask him is what, has he come up with a planned cost per rural subscriber for the privatization of the rural subscribers line?
Well, Mr. Speaker, quite obviously, there are estimates of the cost of the individual line service. Obviously, those cost estimates vary depending upon the distance between the subscriber and the switching station. And it is quite clear at this point, based upon existing technology, that the service which can and will be provided will be equal to, in rural Alberta, or maybe even better than in some parts of the urban system, because it will have been built at a more recent time. But to suggest that that should be by way of fiber optics on single line connections is not, according to any information I have seen, a cost-effective approach for that portion of the loop.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, makes Nijinsky look like he had flat feet the way you move around. But, can the Premier or can the minister confirm that the future expansion of telecommunications equipment will be very limited in rural areas due to the electromagnetic equipment which constrains expansion?
Mr. Speaker, I cannot confirm any such notion as the honourable leader is advancing.
Member for Edmonton Millwoods. Mr. Speaker, after having ignored the telecommunication requirements of rural Alberta for so many years, can the minister now tell us when, in fact, this Assembly will be informed as to when rural telephone subscribers will, in fact, have the single-line service that was recently promised?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has demonstrated his lack of understanding of telecommunications in the rest of Canada, and for that matter the United States, in his allegation. In fact, Alberta's rural communities and rural subscribers have a fewer number of subscribers per telephone loop than any place else in Canada on average.
Member for Little Bow.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the minister, and it's with regards to the rate structure. Has the minister established a rate structure for the privatization of these telephones in rural Alberta? And if so, could it be tabled And could the minister also indicate relative to rate structure whether rate structure will vary from one area of the province to another?
Mr. Speaker, the commitment made was that the rate structure, if by that is meant the connection, the installation of the individual line service, would be the same for all rural lines. And that rate structure will, of course, have to be subject to the approval of the Public Utilities Board. If it turns out that we can improve upon the proposed structure that was suggested during the election, that will be done.
Leader of the Representative Party, followed by the member for Calgary North Hill.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Agriculture, and it's relative to concerns I've heard in the last couple of days from farmers in terms of congestion at the elevators in the province of Alberta, and this congestion relative to the July 30th deadline for quotas from the Canadian Wheat Board. Has the minister talked to the Wheat Board recently in the last couple of days, and if so, is there some way of alleviating this problem?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we had communicated in excess of a week ago the concerns that were raised in this chamber to the federal minister, and I took the liberty also yesterday to further telex him indicating our deep concern about the congestion at the elevator level. We received a response from his office today indicating that they are examining the possibility and they hope to come forward with a response to our telex in which we indicated in a very forceful way our hopes that they would extend the time period in which farmers could deliver to the elevators.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question to the minister, and it's with regards to number 1 and number 2 hard wheat, durum, and so on, that cannot be delivered because the quota deadline was 3 or 4 days ago. And has the minister made representation with regards to that aspect of quotas so that they could be reopened so that farmers could deliver that wheat which is on the farms at the present time?
We made representations, Mr. Speaker, in a very general sense so that areas such as the honourable member for Little Bow raised, those areas would involve themselves in our general discussions that we have had with the Canadian Wheat Board and with the Minister's office so that we could alleviate concerns such as he has raised. I should share with the honourable member also that the Wheat Board was under the impression that they could accommodate all grains coming in on this last week, but their estimates were low on what was deliverable, and for that reason they are giving consideration, I understand, to possibly extending the deadline date.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the minister, could the minister indicate what that extension would be? Are we talking about 1 week extension, 2 week extension with regards to the quota?
Mr. Speaker, that's a decision that will have to come from the federal level. We're hopeful that the extension will allow the opportunity for farmers to deliver whatever grains they do have on stock and that they do wish to deliver. I couldn't give the honourable member a definite answer in regard to that because that is a federal level decision.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the minister, could the minister indicate whether inquiries at this point should be made directly to the minister's office with regards to this concern, or is the Canadian Wheat Board going to work through the rural elevators of Alberta to give the farmers notification, which they haven't done at the present time?
Mr. Speaker, in fairness to the Canadian Wheat Board, they won't be able to give any indication until they hear and are directed to extend that time period. In response to the first part of the honourable member's question, I'm more than happy to relay whatever information is relayed to us and leave him with the assurance again that we are going to continue to make strong representations to our federal counterparts to offset this very legitimate concern.
Member for Vegreville.
Supplementary to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, will the Honourable Minister undertake to request a review of the way in which grain cars are allocated, given the fact that farmers paying the railways more to move their grain has not provided them with better service?
Mr. Speaker, that's an area we're more than happy to look into in view of the representations received from the honourable member, and it just might be that my honourable colleague, the Minister responsible for Economic Development, might wish to supplement it.
Mr. Speaker, earlier when it became evident to us that there was a lack of availability of hopper cars, and particularly in some areas of the province. We made representations and were able to speed up the availability of cars, and we're assured that the cars would be made available.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplemental to the Minister of Agriculture. Could the Minister assure the House that the question of extending the deadline for deliveries will be on the agenda in this love-in tomorrow so that he can move his category from hopeful to maybe possible?
Mr. Speaker, I'm more than happy to raise that concern with my federal counterparts, as I already have done and will continue to do until we hopefully have a resolution to this problem. I should also mention to the honourable member, as I mentioned to him quite some time ago, if he has individual farmers that are concerned, they can make representations on a personal basis to the Canadian Wheat Board and have their personal quota extended in the event that they do make those personal representations. And I hope that he is relaying that to the individuals within his rural area and within his responsibility.
Member for Calgary North Hill, followed by the member for Edmonton Belmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question, Mr. Speaker, is to the Minister of Housing. Several owners of apartments under the Core Housing Incentive Program and under the Modest Apartment Program have found themselves with negative equity and accumulating arrears, and are concerned about the position of the corporation, the Alberta Housing and Mortgage Corporation, in respect to that situation. And my question is, can the Minister assure the owners that the corporation will proceed with its offer to restructure those loans?
Mr. Speaker, that is in process at the present time. The offer was made, I believe, first in March to CHIP and MAP borrowers. And the acceptance rate was fairly well taken up by the borrowers. Now, some borrowers had other concerns. And what happened then was that the corporation, as a matter of fact, a meeting of the board within the last 2 weeks has detailed further consideration in respect to the same problem. But the corporation is working on some refinements of the original offer made in March, and has extended deadlines for acceptance into September.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Has the Minister met with the representatives of the Association of Owners with respect to those terms? And if not, do you intend to do so?
Mr. Speaker, the corporation, through the President and through a subcommittee of the board, has met with proponents of the Owners Association. I had one meeting scheduled which the Owners Association representative wasn't able to attend. And I would be more than willing to meet with that delegation. But in the meetings that I have had, they have been with individual owners.
Supplementary to the Minister, Mr. Speaker. Will the owners who previously accepted the first offer receive the benefit of any final offer, notwithstanding the fact that they executed that first offer?
Mr. Speaker, I believe the way it was done was that a offer and acceptance by way of exchange of correspondence was the first request from the corporation to the owners, and a number of them did indeed accept. The situation would be that given the extension of the deadline, that any changed proposals would also be available up until that time to the ones that had previously accepted.
Member for Calgary Mountain View.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, as a supplementary, in Airdrie, in the Big Spring subdivision, there are well over 200 properties owned by AMHC, and I understand that only 20 to 25% of those properties are presently occupied. My question is whether AMHC is prepared to dispose of these homes in an orderly manner over a period of several months, even if it has to sell them at a loss, or is it the policy of AMHC to hold on to these vacant homes indefinitely?
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable member is talking about single-family dwellings, and I don't mind responding as to the policy province-wide for the corporation. The policy is that homes that come into the ownership of the corporation as a result of usually the negative equity situation and people giving them up, or by foreclosure, those homes are held, and in some cases, when that can be, are rented. And indeed, in the larger centres, some of them have been converted to community housing, and the overall plan as to sale, though, is that they would be put into the market in a very spread out and long-term way, so as not to destroy, in effect, in areas where the corporation would have a lot of houses, not to destroy the market.
Member for Edmonton Belt. Member for Calgary Buffalo.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. I was wondering whether the minister might tell the House what would be the amount of the losses incurred by Alberta Housing and Mortgage Corporation, both absolutely and in terms of the percentage of the loans made by that corporation over the last 5 years. And if he doesn't have those figures to hand, might he table them in the House at the earliest opportunity?
Draw the attention of the honourable member that that's such a detail, especially with respect to 5-year period, that it's properly a question for the order paper. The chair recognizes the member for Edmonton Belmont, followed by the member for Clover Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is directed to the Premier, and it has been revealed that the general contractor for the Artnam Development condominium, which is jointly owned by many current and former members of the Executive Council and Government, was appointed to the board of Alberta Mortgage and Housing Corporation by a minister with a share in the building company. What plan does the Premier have to issue new guidelines to prevent appointments of individuals who are directly involved in business relationships with ministers of the Crown to crucial government positions?
Mr. Speaker, I've talked to the members of the government who are involved in the business transaction regarding the building of a condominium development, and my review indicates that it is a normal business transaction, and where members have invested at some risk, I must admit, and hopefully, I guess they were intending that they might participate in this investment and then end up in obtaining a condominium for their investment, each of them. But my review was that that was a normal business transaction, not in any way involving them in their responsibilities as ministers of the Crown. The second matter I checked into was the fact that the contractor involved was in fact a member of the board of the Alberta Home Mortgage Corporation. Checked into this several days ago, and the Home Mortgage Corporation is not in any way involved in this project. We are pleased that a knowledgeable person is prepared to serve the province. It's certainly not an appointment that respect, it is somebody who accepts a responsibility to serve the province and provide knowledge at some considerable cost, usually to themselves. And that person does provide that service to the province by serving as a member of the board of the Home Mortgage Corporation. Obviously, when someone serves like that, they're not expected to give up their normal business. And as a matter of fact, they're expected that they would stay in their own business. And that person has done that, and I understand provides a good service as a contractor, and in no way is there any conflict with his responsibilities to the Alberta Home Mortgage Corporation.
It would appear, Mr. Speaker, that Peter Pockington went after the wrong pork board. Is the Premier saying then... Is the Premier saying, I'm just waiting, is the Premier saying that it is of no concern to him or this government when individuals are involved in direct business or financial relationships with ministers that at the same time on Crown Corporation boards?
Mr. Speaker, I took some considerable time to answer the member's question. He then asked me, what did I say? I think he ought to read the answer and get his answer.
Listen.
Second supplementary. Has the Premier determined whether or not ministers holding shares in this enterprise should have those shares administered by a trust?
Why?
Mr. Speaker, I dealt with that in the first part of my question. I mean, if they're going to have their supplementals written out, they should listen to the answer in case a supplemental isn't needed. If they're going to... Now, Mr. Speaker, these two parties in Ottawa are making a disgrace of the House of Commons. I hope they aren't going to try and do it here in this legislature. The one other thing, Mr. Speaker, I didn't say earlier in my answer was that the members involved had filed the notice of their interest with the Legislative Assembly.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I listened to the answers, and I didn't get that out of it. But however, to the minister responsible for housing, a large group of developers has been urging the government to change its arrangement with regard to the CHIP and MAP, which was discussed earlier, programs. Is the minister able to assure the Assembly that none of the members of the Alberta Mortgage and Housing Corporation are personally involved with those programs?
Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't know in the hundreds of projects the Mortgage and Housing Corporation has been involved in, whether or not some person who has been or is now a member of the board would be involved. I would think that at the time that they would be involved with the board, that they would not be involved in borrowing from the corporation. I guess the only other thing to be said about it is that lending programs are decided by objective criteria in the sense of the program, and it's the program parameters and limitations that might be on it, and the value of the security. But as to individual board members, Mr. Speaker, I don't have that knowledge at hand.
Supplementary, the member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Supplemental, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, although he may want to pass it on, with regard to the CHIP program, the loan interest for contractors born from the CHIP program was reduced just before the election from 8.75% down to 6%. To 6%. What justification does he have for asking the farmers of this province to put up 9% when the CHIP program was reduced to 6%, apparently to many cronies and other contractors?
The supplementary question is not really supplemental. I'm sorry, honourable member, it is not. The original question was with respect to conflict of interest, so that general flavor. Chair recognizes the member for Clover Bar.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister of the Environment, and this has to do with the monitoring of what materials go into sanitary landfill sites. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister indicate what monitoring system there is in place at the site to make sure that, let's say, undesirable or hazardous chemicals are not dumped into these sanitary landfill sites? As an example, the Clover Bar site.
Mr. Speaker, there's no jurisdiction for Alberta Environment with respect to sanitary landfill sites in the province of Alberta. Responsibility for that rests with my colleague, the Minister of Community Health.
Speaker, then to...
The time for question period has expired. I would ask the Assembly, might we finish the set of questions with respect to the... First, the point of order. Yes.
Point of order. I understand, Mr. Speaker, as I was referred to the end of the question period. What I wanted to get back to is the chip question is very closely involved with the conflict of interest, because the conflict of interest involves question as the minister or as the member from Edmonton asked was on the conflict of interest, the ownership of the cabinet ministers involved in a condo tied to town here, and that the individual involved in building that was on the board of the Alberta Housing and Mortgage Corporation, and is also was very in the forefront of it in asking that it was the Alberta Housing and Mortgage Corporation that reduced, about the same time this conflict has taken place, interest charges to the contractors. He knows full well what I'm talking about if he reads any paper.
The chip is connected. Honourable member, I've taken your point of order, and I'm afraid I am still of the opinion that your supplementary question really is not germane totally to the topic. Question with respect to the House: is the House prepared to finish the set of questions which have been introduced by the member for Clover Bar? Thank you.
Speaker, then my question is to the Minister of Community and Occupational Health. This has to do with monitoring of what materials go into sanitary landfill sites. Can the Minister indicate what monitoring there is in place to make sure that undesirable materials are not dumped into those sanitary landfill sites?
Mr. Speaker, that issue and all other matters relating to public health become the responsibility of the 27 public health units located in 27 regions around the province. But I know, Mr. Speaker, that matter and all matters of public health are being looked at and are being carefully monitored by public health officers on a day-to-day basis.
Mr. Speaker, then to the Minister, can the Minister indicate what system there is in place to make sure that there's no leaching of materials from these sanitary landfill sites into, let's say, adjacent bodies of water, such as the North Saskatchewan River in the case of the Clover Bar sanitary landfill?
So many occasions. Mr. Speaker, I don't have those the details of that at hand, and I could take the question as notice and come back to the honourable member with an answer.
Okay, my last supplementary then, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, so he can get this information. Also, what monitoring system is there in place at summer resorts to make sure that there's no leaching of, let's say, outdoor toilets into the recreational body of water? Can the Minister bring that information back to the Assembly also?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I can, and if the honourable member can convince his colleague about 3 to the left, I could bring that back after question period is completed tomorrow.
Supplementary, member for Edmonton Glengarry.
The Minister of Environment, in view of the fact that new research is indicating how dangerous landfill sites can be in terms of chemical pollution, is the Minister planning on bringing regulations before the government that will control very dangerous pollutants being put into landfill sites and the leaching out of those pollutants?
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I would ask the member from Edmonton Glengarry to kindly identify for me what this bibliography of research is. My understanding is that it's really not quite the same. And in fact, it'd be my pleasure, perhaps not on Monday the 21st of July, but perhaps Monday the 28th of July, to file with the Legislative Assembly a review undertaken recently on scads of landfills in the province of Alberta, which suggests quite the opposite.
Time for question period has been extended today by 5 minutes. We have left 6 members waiting in the on-deck circle. Orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the question period has taken a little longer today. On July the 9th, I promised to respond to the member from Little Bow regarding a question he asked me. I understand the sensitivity of certain members regarding providing this information even after having promised it, so perhaps I'm in your hands as to how I might do it.
Do we have unanimous consent for the Premier to give additional information to the House? Opposed, if any, please say no. Mr. Premier, please.
He locked his position,
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. The promise. Okay. One more bathroom. How's that? Mr. Speaker, on July the 9th, the honourable member for Little Bow asked a question regarding the growth of sales of Alberta natural gas to Quebec. I didn't have those figures at my fingertips and promised to report back to him, and I'd just like to provide the information as follows. Alberta sales of natural gas to Quebec have grown in the last several years. As a matter of fact, they have more than doubled in the last 10 years, going from 77.9 billion cubic feet in 1975 to 163.5 billion cubic feet in 1985. The growth of the market has been a result of incentive pricing and also the pipeline expansions providing this ability to take the gas to greater and greater areas of Quebec. That's the information that was requested.
Orders of the day.
Committee of Supply.